Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofrumento. If you're anything like me, then sometimes in business, you go through a love-hate relationship with social media. Well, today, we're going to hopefully dispel all of that, and we're going to get really excited about the impact, the positive impact that social media can have on your business. And we're doing it with an incredible guest who's energy is infectious when it comes to social media. Let me tell you all about her. Her name is Mary Gunther. She's the founder and CEO of the Social G Company. I love that name for her brand. Mary has a passion for people and small business development with the belief that social media platforms are the communication platforms of our time. Mary strives to make social media a bright spot in people's days through creative, engaging, and authentic content. How much nicer does that sound than the way that so many of us do social? For Mary, there's nothing better than seeing a client get excited about their social media presence and watch as their online community and business thrives, a goal that all of us share. So I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Mary Gunther. All right, Mary, I'm so excited that you're here. So much for us to dive into. But first things first, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Brian. I'm super excited to be here with you.
Heck yeah, you already heard me confess my love-hate relationship with social. So much that we'll talk about here today, but take listeners beyond the bio. Talk to them about how the heck you got here, how you fell in love with social, how you get to do all the awesome things that you do today.
Sure. Well, I'm going to take it way back for a second, if you don't mind. And because the whole podcast is Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur. And I've been in the Wantrepreneur category since I was a little girl. My grandma, Nancy Quazarano, started her own data entry processing company in the late 60s, 70s and grew it. Ford Motor Company was one of her clients. She employed 100 women. So I grew up with that influence in my life. So for me to now be on the entrepreneur side is super meaningful to me. So it just happens to be in social media because I have a knack for that. But I'm just so proud to be here. And I think for entrepreneurs, just keeping in mind that you could be influencing people around you that you don't even know, especially little ones. So that's what I wanted to share today about my background with this.
Yeah, I love that, Mary. It's funny. I always think that there's so many different shapes that entrepreneurial journeys can take. For some people, they have it in their DNA, which it sounds like you do. That's such an epic story in your family's background. I mean, to employ 100 women, that is honestly incredible at a time where I'd argue it was way more difficult back then than it is today. We have way more tools.
There's a story my grandma used to always say that she couldn't even get a credit card, directly. So anyway, I think it runs in the family. I think it's innate, but I also think it can be inspired.
Yeah, really well said. I love that point that you just made. When we talk about inspired, Mary, I find it difficult at times to be inspired and excited. It's a word from your bio about social media. But one thing that really stands out to me about the way that you view social is, you said it, it's the communication platform. We don't always view it as a communication platform. Talk to me about why that intentional verbiage behind that. What is your view on social and the role that it plays in business?
Yeah, I mean, listen, social media, people have so many feelings about it, which is interesting to me. But social media is a part of our daily lives. If you look at some statistics, how many times people are looking at it, spending time on it. And I think where people get confused is, they might not spend a lot of time on it. But I always tell them, well, that doesn't mean that other people aren't. So I really do feel like these tools, for one, they're free. Anyone, could go on and start a page, which is a huge advantage to any business owner, and to compared to not that long ago where you had to pay for newspaper ads or billboards or TV commercials. That to me is not that is not where things are anymore. So that's where I just go to. These are the tools of our time. And if a business is not on there, and not just on there, but providing value and a place for people to go, I just really think it's a missed opportunity. But I just think some people get wrapped up in all the feelings about social media. And I try and help to dispel some of that for them.
Yeah, Mary, I'm going to push you a little bit more because I want to articulate it here in today's episode so listeners know they're not alone. Talk to us about those feelings that need to be dispelled, because you see it with your clients, and obviously there's a heck of a lot of listeners who probably have those feelings and so much more. What are those feelings? What muddies the water for us when we think about social?
I talk to people that they hate how their voice sounds on camera. They can't look at the screen, and it just makes them very uncomfortable. And I totally get that. It's not like, many of us, we're not born into like being in front of a screen. Like that's kind of outside of the realm of what most business owners think they have to do. And nowadays I almost feel like it's mandatory. Like you're the brand. Even if your business is, any business industry, if you own a business, people want to know what you're about, and what your business is about. And I think that the business owner needs to be involved in that. So there's feelings about that, like being on camera. There's feelings about social media, like, almost like resentment, like, I'm not going to do it. Like my business is successful enough. And then there's just like the frustration with people that like, they know they need to have social media. They just really struggle with finding the time to do posts or like coming up with content or staying consistent. So then you have business pages that haven't had a post since 2019, and when people go to that page to check your business out, because they do, that's for sure happening, and there's nothing there recently, they might think, are they even in business anymore? Like, this is what's going on here. So there's a lot of layers of this, and I try and help people to get past some of those hurdles. And if really they have no desire and can't, then they just hire me and hire my company to do it for them.
Yeah. And it's nice to know that there are options out there like that, which I'm excited to talk about how the heck a social media agency works on behalf of clients, which we'll definitely get into today. But from my perspective, there's really two sides of this coin that I know for listeners' sake, we need to get into today. And you already brought up, a lot of people say that they don't have the time. And I think that time is such a bogus excuse that we all happen to get into in life. I've tried to replace I don't have the time with it's not a priority. I think that's a really healthy way to point out that we do have the time. It's all about prioritization. If you have time to sit down on the couch and turn the TV on, you have time for social. You have time for marketing. You have time for whatever it is that might grow your business. But with that said, Mary, I think where people trick themselves into believing they don't have the time is maybe content's not fun for them, is when they do sit at the computer, they bang their head against the wall and they say, I don't even know what to do. So I think that's one side of the coin. And the second side of the coin is if there are people on the other side of it who are engaging with us, who love the stuff that we're putting out, then we will find the time. We will love doing it because we're reaping those rewards. So I think that those are the two sides we need to get into today. Mary, where do you want to start? Are we talking audience first or content first?
Let's stick with content, because I think that that's a big struggle for people. And I think that, so what I tell people is this: content should just make it part of your day to day. Like, people love to see what you're out and about doing. So, behind the scenes is a big thing too, right? Like, people just want to know what you're doing. So before this podcast, I just snapped a pic, threw it up in my stories and said, can't wait for my interview with Brian. So I think just like having people have a different mindset, that getting content, like start snapping photos, start taking short video, because then you have a phone full of things that you can go back and talk about, post about. And here's the other thing about content. People think that you have to come up with original content like every single post. You do not. And that's where analytics comes in, when, if you really dive into some of that and you see what's resonating with your audience. I would say a few months later, rerun that same post, rerun that same video. Not every single person has seen it, and in their feed. And even if they did, I think we all know this, like, people have to see or hear something like 9, 10 times to like even have it kind of resonate. As an example, I hit my social media obviously pretty hard because I'm a big believer and I have to walk the walk. I'm not going to ask people to do something I'm not doing. And I still have people like So like, what are you doing? And I'm like, and I'm posting what I'm doing a lot. So you don't always have to have original content. Incorporate it in your day to day. And I would also say creating a content calendar, like I'm talking like a high level spreadsheet. Okay. This doesn't have to be like a huge deal, will help to guide you, and using scheduling tools, So I think if, people can get into like incorporating this in their life and batching stuff out, I think that they can manage it. I just think that most people, it's something like if they don't have the desire to do it, then that's a different story. But I do think there's ways that I can teach people how to do it. And if they really can't do it, then that's where our relationship begins. And we can talk more about like what that looks like.
Yeah, Mary, I love two things I want to call out for listeners right now is one, I'm a big fan of batching. I think that is the way. If every single day you need to sit down and carve out new time for social media, it's kind of difficult. But if you can just in one, let's say 90 minutes a week, you sit down and you plan out your entire week of social and schedule it, as you said, that's a really effective way to do it. People always ask me, how do you manage a 5-day-a-week podcast? I don't do this 5 days a week. We have 2 recording days and that's it. And we get ahead for weeks. So I love that perspective. The second thing I want to call out, Mary, because listeners probably don't fully embrace the genius of what you just dropped on us, is that we would be amazed at how few people realize what we do. Still to this day, 7 years in, 700 plus episodes, I still talk to my friends and family who are like, oh, you have a podcast? And I'm like, I only post about it all the freaking time on Instagram and on Facebook. So I definitely want to echo those, Mary. Let's talk about the actual content of the content, because I think it's fascinating. You work with so many different businesses, realtors, gyms, wedding venues, consultants. How do we even make social content for all these different types of businesses? What content? Are there formulas you lean towards? Are there proven models? How do we even start that?
Yeah. So I have a background in organizational development. So my past life was in human resources. So I think I have a knack at like when I onboard a new client, I really go deep on their business, the history of their business, their target audience, who they're serving, who they think they're serving. I really ask them questions about all of that, but I also ask them questions about like themselves, like what are you about? Who are you? So I try and gather a lot from that. So like that's something that happens with each and every client that we onboard. And as time passes, you get to know each other better, and it really is a collaboration. So as far as the types of content we do, obviously, I don't think I have to say this, but like, short video is mandatory. I think a combination of posts is great. Traditional reels and video stories, like I do think they all have their place. It doesn't have to be video all the time, but it definitely needs to be there. And as far as content goes, here's the thing. Like people think you're competing with other similar businesses on social media to like have to have better content than them, or, just be better than people in your same industry. And here's the thing, like at the end of the day, you're just trying to make people stop their scroll. And so like if you're posting, I have a client that's a pressure washer. Okay. I mean, it's pressure washing, but like we do some fun video with the water and kind of have fun with it. And it's like, I always am a big advocate of humor. I think people enjoy that, but I think it has to be authentic, engaging, educational. Like you have to provide value. So like when people go to your social media page, they should be able to learn a ton for free. Like you're not charging people for like your expertise, but you're becoming then the trusted person for when and if they're ready to purchase or move forward. They're like, oh, Mary Gunther, social media. I know she knows a lot about that. So that's kind of how we approach different businesses and industries. But at the end of the day, like I think it comes back to people. People want to know people, and people want to know who you are. And really, if you look at it like that, it's pretty simple formula.
Yeah, I love and appreciate the fact that you point that out, the human element behind social media, because I do think we get lost in all these copywriting formulas and the graphics. It's never been easier. I mean, we could all hop on Canva and start creating graphics, but hearing you talk about the different types of businesses, it really makes me think about what makes me stop to scroll. And for example, yes, I use TikTok. That is like my guilty pleasure for 15 minutes a night. And I was just thinking the other night when I was scrolling through TikTok, what got me to stop was just this guy who owns a private investigator business. I've never worked with one. I've never needed one. I've never interacted with one. But seeing the behind the scenes of his work, I was like, this is interesting. And so granted, even if I never need him ever again or want him, if I ever see him or someone says, oh yeah, private investigator, I'm just like, oh, there's this guy on TikTok. It's the first person. It's just that top of mind presence. You talked about how many times we need to see something to remember it. How many times do people need to hear that we do something for them to think of us in those moments of need? So I love those perspectives, Mary. I want to ask you about the adjectives that we use, because you've talked about having fun content, engaging content, educational, creative content. What's the bridge there for entrepreneurs or wantrepreneurs who are listening to us saying, well, yeah, creating that content's one thing, but how do I turn that into customers and clients? What's that bridge look like?
You know, I think social media has this, I think it gets like this rap, like social media is going to solve all your business problems. And like, if you start doing social media consistently, you're going to just like have sales just pouring in. And I would argue social media is a long game for one. I mean, I would rather have 100 followers that are engaged and listening and promoting me than a 1,000 that like don't really care. So I just think I think social media is just misunderstood. I think at the end of the day, I think the purpose of it is that it's a place where people can go to learn more about you and your business. It's a place where they know they're going to gain value, be entertained. I mean, you know, people want to be entertained at the end of the day, like on social media. I do think that's a big part of it. But I think it's just, again, it's positioning yourself as the trusted, like, you know, the whole know, like, trust. Like if people feel like they know you, even though it's through a platform, a screen, they're going to be more apt to, like, again, when and if they're ready to purchase, you're top of mind. So, you know, obviously you can pay for ads. My area of specialty is more organic. But I have had people come to me just, you know, I have gained business just from my organic stuff. But if people think you're going to like blow your business up by doing social media for 3 months straight, it's really, really a long game. And I think, and it's a consistent game. Like you have to do it. You cannot let a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks go by with nothing. It's really a commitment. So, but there are ways you can do sales through social media, you know, where you're doing the call to action, you're getting the hook, you're directing people, you're making it easy for them to engage with your business or purchase. So it's all about like those processes too. So that's kind of my take, but also like a business owner should definitely be doing in-person networking, have a website, like other marketing initiatives. Like social media is not the end all be all. And that's probably crazy coming from me, but it's true.
Yeah, Mary, I'll tell you what, I respect you so much for that answer that you just shared with us, because I've experienced it firsthand. We all learn it the hard way. Hopefully you sharing this with us is going to accelerate a lot of listeners' journeys when it comes to understanding social this way. I don't use social media for sales. Anyone who follows me on social, I'd rather talk about tennis, I'd rather talk about soccer or my family. That's more important for me. And a lot of people, when they ask me like, oh, Brian, you know, I did an online course launch and I got X $1,000 in revenue. And people will say, how did you do that? What's the key to that? And the older I've gotten, Mary, and the more I've gotten into my entrepreneurial journey, the more I've realized, well, my social did the work. It doesn't show up. My sales happen through my email list, but my social made selling so much easier because for example, one person who bought one of my courses last year, I remember he reached out to me and he's like, dude, I first started listening to your podcast. Then I followed you on Instagram and you're always talking about tennis. I live in Australia. I love tennis. And so that relationship was there without me even knowing it, just because I was showing up on social the way that I am. So it made my email list sales so much easier. So I love that perspective. Is there something you want to add to that, Mary?
Yeah, I was just going to add, the whole reason my business even came to be was because I was doing, I have a wine business as well. So I do a lot of like wine, the whole wine mom, stuff. It's fun. But the reason my business even came to be is because like I was just doing good content and people started asking me, hey, can you help me? Hey, like I started gaining kind of like a side client here, a side client there. Because people do notice. I have people walk up to me, family members and friends I haven't seen in a long time. And they're like, I can't wait when you drop a reel. It's like so fun to watch. It's like I look for them. And like I'm waiting for them. And if you can create that that anticipation where like, oh, Mary just dropped a reel, it's going to be funny or it's going to be whatever. Then you can weave in like a business reel and people aren't like offended. Like, oh, you're just always trying to sell me something. Cause you're like, it's not all about that. So I think that, I see people and they see my stuff and I'm like, oh, you see that? Like, I forget that people actually watch it. Like, I really don't even look at who watches it. Like, but I have people come up to me like, are you Mary Gunther? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, I love your stuff. And it's really like, that's the power of organic social media.
Yeah, I love that. And speaking of Reels, I'm curious to hear your perspective on that. It almost feels like since the introduction of Reels that it's never been easier to start getting that organic reach. I remember when I first started my business, this was back in 2008, that old adage of if you build it, they will come. That used to be true in 2008. But then the game got harder and then you had to know things. You had to be strategic. You had to be intentional. And it became harder to get eyeballs, especially when platforms like Facebook, Instagram, Google, YouTube started charging for ads. Well, now you have to pay to play. It really changed the game. But Mary, is it true that Reels have really kind of taken us back to if you build it, they will come? It's easy to get that traction again, whether it's from your own audience, but also completely new eyeballs to you. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So, I post pretty consistently Reels, like just for my clients, but for myself. And, the big A word, algorithm, and everyone thinks the algorithm's like out to get them. But like, I will say this, like the more you do, like I will post a Reel now, like on Facebook as an example, which Facebook is a great place to post Reels within Facebook as a platform because there's more demand than supply right now. So you can post a Reel on Facebook right now and it'll like a quick 700 views. So that's a little tip right there. But I will post a Reel and within minutes, 100 views. Because like I feel like the consistency of posting like just makes it like it starts to distribute it. So again, back to the consistency. But I also think that Reels, there's tips and tricks. You can, use trending audio and there's things you can do, that help the algorithm, of course. But also people forget so your Reel, let's say it even gets 35 views, right? And you're like, oh, it's a failure. That's 35 people. And like in the business world, like if 35 people heard a message you said in person, you'd be like, I had the best, training session. I presented to 35 people. So like people just like this whole thing where like if something doesn't go viral, it's a failure. Like that's not true. Like people are watching and it's like it's the people that will hopefully convert to customers someday or clients. And if they don't, then they're going to be a fan of yours to tell their friends and family that like I know someone. So that's my thought on Reels, I think. And also like Reels, I know some people listening to this will be like, no, they're not fun. I mean, they can be fun though. And I think if you're having fun with them and you're not self-conscious and you're just like, I'm going to throw this silly Reel out, like, I think people can feel that. So I would encourage I always encourage people, done is better than perfect when it comes to Reels. And also the more you do, the easier it gets. And you can't just do one Reel and like, Like you have to, if you see my reels from a few years ago to now, tremendously better. So practice does make perfect when it comes to short video.
Yes, as a podcaster myself, I so appreciate that advice from you, because when I go back and listen to episode 1 of this show, it was so bad, I sounded bored. And so here we are 700 plus episodes later. And obviously I've fine-tuned my craft and I've obviously gotten better. And speaking of this, Mary, one thing I want to give you especially credit for is I do love the way that you show up as you in your socials. You talked about the Instagram story that you posted before we hopped on our interview today. And it's just you saying like, I propped my computer up on a box. Like, this is what I'm doing behind the scenes. Talk to us about that authentic thing, because I feel like there's so much mixed advice out there for entrepreneurs. I remember when I first started, I mean, everyone would always say like, fake it till you make it. But I just think the more that I've shown me in my businesses and in my content, the more that people have gravitated towards it. I'm always excited. Like, you can't tune into my stuff and not realize that about me. Where's fake it till you make it apply? How do we, as new business owners, there's a lot of new business owners who tune into this show. How do we navigate that world?
Yeah. I mean, I'm so sick of the word authentic, even though I use it like all the time. I think just authenticity to me is like when people meet me in real life and they see my socials, like I want them to feel like it's the same person, like that it's me, right? So I just think that's an important part of it. And just like if people, when they're talking to the screen, it can feel awkward because they're like, who am I talking to here? But if you can just imagine people like that you talk to in real life, like, 'cause there's people I know that are like tremendous salespeople in person, and they're like so scared to go on the screen. And I'm like, it's the same thing. It's a different avenue. So, yeah, I just think I do also though believe that I think taking action is huge. And as far as fake it till you make it, I think that I like to look at that more as you need to step in to the person. You need to step into the CEO role. Like a CEO is going to do the video because they know it's going to help their business. Like you have to start acting, even if it's uncomfortable, yourself, you will respond accordingly if you just push aside the thoughts like, I'm scared to do this. And you're just like, be quiet, I'm doing this. And you start to do it and embrace it. I just think it gets easier. And again, like that's with my clients, they are the clients that are game to hop in and be engaged and collaborate with us and be on camera, like their pages by far do the best because I can't be them either. So, that's kind of my feedback in that. I think being an entrepreneur is scary enough, but then like video is scary, but like we can do it. You can do it. You really can.
Yeah, really good advice. That reminds me of that quote, dress for the job you want, not the job that you have. And it's funny that when we start, even let's take this literally, even for me, for example, if I remember people would always ask me, they're like, do you just wake up and you like can do your podcast interviews in your pajamas? And I'm like, no, because that puts you in a different mindset. Dress up, like be ready for the day. And I think that that's so important because when we start doing that, well, we start growing into that role. So I think it's a really good piece of advice from you there, Mary. I want to ask you about the audience. I think we have to go there. We've talked about reels and those abilities to get you that audience. So many people, though, I'm speaking for the listeners now, where I know that so many of them say, well, Mary, what if I have no audience? What if I'm starting from scratch, especially? And also, I'm going to weave two questions into this. And I know they're both topics in and of themselves, Mary, but for so many newer entrepreneurs, they're thinking, well, if I start a business page on Instagram, for example, I have literally 0 followers. How do I even start this?
So I will say, first of all, everyone who's on Instagram has to start at 0. So like no one's starting a page at 10,000 fans out of the gate. So we all have to build. Again, it's a long game. And I only have like 100 some followers on my business. And that's fine, but it's growing. I would rather have like consistent growth over time than like a bunch of fake followers that you're like, do these people, like, who are these people? So I'm cool with that. I also think that like, I do think your warm market, like friends and family, a lot of people are scared to put their business out on like their personal stuff because they're like, I don't want to bother my friends and family with like my business. And I'm like, your friends and family love to support you. Like, as long as you're not like overdoing it, people love to support people they care about. So like, I post about my business on my personal page, and I ask people, hey, I'd love if you could like my business page. Like, I'm doing some fun things over there. And I think people are happy to do that. I mean, what's a like and a comment? Like, and if you have some people that are willing to do that for you, I just think it helps to like get some momentum going, right? So, I've started new Facebook pages for people that have zero presence, and I'm talking about like zero personal Facebook page. Okay. And this is why I love helping people like this, that like, they're so like sad. They're like, I have no idea how to even do any of this. And I'm like, listen, here's what we're going to do. We're going to start you a personal page. We're going to start you a business page from that. You're going to go find your people. You're going to add them. Like, you got to start somewhere. And then it just goes from there. And then after that, there's things you can do to grow your audience. You can run a paid ad. You can, and you start talking about your socials. But if there's no socials to talk about and there's nothing on the socials, don't talk about them. And I would even say, if you have a social media page that is like, hasn't been posted on in years, like, I would almost just say like, get rid of it. Like, don't even have it online, like start over, because, or reactivate it. But that's kind of my feelings on that. You have to get over, I'm bothering people with my business. It's like, if you do it the right way, people are happy to support you. They really are.
Yes, amen to that advice. It's something I say on this podcast very frequently is we'll very happily promote other people's causes before we'll promote our own. But it's so funny because our people love our cause more than anything else, other than their own cause, of course. So yeah, really good advice there, Mary. A good invitation for people to, if we've been putting this to the side, jump back in. I love the word reactivate it. There's no reason why you can't do that. So really good advice there. You brought up a couple of organic growth strategies. Well, I guess you brought up paid as one strategy. We talked about Reels before. What are some of those other organic growth strategies? I want to squeeze a few of them in here towards the end of this session.
So, I social media, right? It's about being social. So I will, if I'm out and about, I snap a pic. I mean, I love food and to eat and drink, right? We're Italian. If I'm at a restaurant, I'll tag the restaurant and be like, I had a great meal here. And then they'll repost it in their story. And then all of a sudden, their audience sees my stuff. So I do think like collabs, and like, that's a like really loose collab, right? Like, you're just throwing up a post. But I also think more formal collaborations where you find like a partnering business or a person that you're like, hey, like, let's do something together where we we cross promote each other. Like, I think people love to see that. I think again, it's just letting people know what you're out doing and just taking them along the ride with you. So I think that's a good organic growth strategy. Again, I'm just like beating this drum, but like, consistency is going to grow your pages. Like, it's so funny. I send clients reports at the end of each month, and like the growth is just staggering. And they're like, oh, impressions and engagements and video views. And I'm like, yes, like, you're feeding the social media monster, right? You're feeding it like what it wants, and it will reward you. So like, again, I think it goes back to consistency, but I think it goes also back to like good content. Like, don't be cranking out 4 posts a week of Canva ads, right? Like, that people like to see people's faces. So the more you can weave that in, I think that things will grow over time. So, that's kind of how I approach it. And like, I've been doing this now a while, and I see reports. And, one other tip for organic growth real quick is, again, leaning into the data. If your top posts in a month performed really well, like, do more of those type of posts. Like, if some posts like no one really cared about, like, don't do those as much. Like, keep giving the people what they want, because people are telling you what they're enjoying to see. Like, I do posts and I'm like, this post is going to be so good. And then like nothing, or like this post is not good. And then like people love it. So you need to like give your audience what they want, not what you think they want, not what you want, what they want. And if they want more videos of you doing your job or whatever it is, then give it to them. Like they want it.
Yes, Mary, I'm so glad I snuck that organic strategies question in there here towards the end of our session, because those are all actionable. And it keeps going back to something you said really on in our episode here today, which is all of this stuff is free. There's literally no barrier to why someone can't do this. You talk about tagging restaurants. I've done that so many times. The co-working space that I'm a member of here in Tampa, I've made like real business connections because I'll tag them when I'm working from there. It's just a picture of my laptop with like the beautiful space in the background. They'll repost it. Guess who sees that? Entrepreneurs and wantrepreneurs. Those are my people. So yeah, super simple there. It's clear for me, for one thing here today, Mary, is that we've all got work to do when it comes to social, which is why I love giving my guests the hardest part of every episode, which is what's the action? We talked about so many things, from a promotional calendar to us being on video to us posting consistently to collaborations, other organic social growth strategies. What the heck do you want listeners to do from here? What's something that every entrepreneur or entrepreneur would benefit from when it comes to growing their socials?
Yeah. I mean, we already talked about all the brass tacks kind of stuff, and probably a lot of it's not surprising to many people that are listening to this. But if I had to say like one thing, another thing is to like get your mind right about social media. It's a business tool. Like, don't put your feelings and your whatever you think about social media on it, because at the end of the day, it's just another tool in your toolbox. So like, if you do dislike social media that much, then you definitely need to hire it out, and to a company that, like mine, that will do it the right way. Because like, don't let that hold your business back. Like, to me, that's the biggest mistake is, you know, if you don't want to be on social media, that's fine. But like, don't hold your business wants to be on social media. And also a lot of people don't want to share a lot about their life. That's fine. We can curate what we're sharing. You don't have to share your deep, dark secrets. Like, we can make it what you want. So I would say the actionable item is think about what you actually think about it, and like, be honest with yourself. Like, if you can't bring yourself to create good, meaningful content, then you need to have someone else do it. So that would be my advice, especially heading into the new year. Huge opportunity to rebrand yourself in the space.
Yes, really good advice there, Mary. I know that it's a natural segue for me to ask you for all the links in where listeners should go, but I also want you to add a little bit to that, because a lot of people probably have never worked with a social media agency before, and they're probably thinking, do you create the posts for me? Like, do you know what I want to talk about? How does that even work? So two things here at the end of today's session is, one, share with people who have never worked with social media agencies before, what does that relationship even look like? And then two, drop those links on us. Don't be shy. I know listeners are going to be keen to see it, especially because I'm going to throw a really quick word of praise in here, is that I see a lot of websites. Obviously, I this is what I do for a living. And your website, not only does it have your energy and as well as your co-founder, but I love the way that you very clearly illustrate, hey, here's all the ingredients that go into a successful social media strategy, whether you do it for yourself or here's what we're really good at. So Mary, take it away. Drop those links on us. Don't be shy.
Will do. So first part of that question, I can't speak for other social media companies of how they operate, but how it works with us is we present you a content calendar and we create all the content and the posts and the video. Obviously, the client's going to be involved with that. Like, I need things from them, but we're going to run it all. And we use Sprout Social as our social media platform. And we get we schedule our clients' posts down to the minute of when their audience is most active. So that's a huge perk and advantage. And then the analytics that we look at from the system. So we run it all. Like, that's our full scale package. We create the calendar, client approves it, we run it all. And then at the end of the month, you get analytics and we just take a look at what's working and what's not. And it just goes on from there. So, but again, like, you know, our clients are getting our creative minds, and they're getting our, sometimes it's good to have a person from the outside look in on your business, and you might get some great fresh stuff from just me coming in and looking at things. So that's kind of how it works with us. And then, yeah, I would love to have everyone follow. And if you follow me, I will definitely follow you back. It's at The Social G Co on Instagram, The Social G Co on Facebook, and www.thesocialgco.com. So I'm Mary G, and I am The Social G.
Yes, I love that, Mary. You make it so easy. Listeners, you all already know the drill. Wherever it is that you're tuning in to today's episode, scroll right on down. You will find a link to thesocialg.com, as well as links to all of Mary's socials, which it's very easy. It's consistent across the board, The Social G. So don't be shy about reaching out to Mary, saying thank you for this episode. And if you want to engage with her and talk about your socials and your business, you found an expert who clearly loves it. So Mary, thank you so much for being so generous with your time and sharing so much of your knowledge here with us on the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast.
Thanks, Brian. It was super fun.